Ms. Schrofa said, Your Honor, the defense calls Scott Barnett.
Gerald Scott Barnett, called as a witness by the defendant, having been duly sworn, testified as follows.
The court said, go ahead.
Ms. Schrofa said, Thank you, Your Honor.
Direct examination. By Ms. Schrofa.
Good afternoon, Mr. Barnett.
Afternoon.
Mr. Barnett, could you tell the jury what you do for a living?
Currently, I am the owner of GS Security Solutions. And I provide executive protection for celebrities, dignitaries, and high net worth individuals.
What does GS stand for?
Well, it was supposed to stand for Global Solutions, but that was taken. So I guess it just stands for Gerald Scott Security really, unfortunately.
And when did you start your company?
That company was started in June of 2022.
Continued on next page. By Ms. Schrofa.
And by what time was it up and running?
January 2nd, I don't recall the exact dates, January of 23.
Mr. Barnett, who provided the funding or the finances to start GS Security?
HCHK.
And how much money did HCHK provide to set up GS Security?
Originally they provided approximately give or take about $400,000 I believe.
And was there additional funding that was provided?
There was in the beginning, correct. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember the date. In December I think of 2022, they provided monies for insurance. And I believe it was just insurance if I recall, but I have to look back.
And did you have any agreement as to this funding?
Yes. At first we had a verbal agreement. It was going to be a written agreement. But that never came to pass, so it stood as a verbal agreement.
Mr. Barnett, could you tell the jury why you wanted to set up a separate company called GS Security?
In order to have proper security for anybody, you really need to have insurance. You have to have, due to certain liabilities for the client that you're protecting. God forbid something were to happen. If it's just either the client themselves or any other entity, they're liable. God forbid we had to put our hands on somebody or anything worse than that or even anything minor. Any lawsuit would go directly to that company instead of to a properly insured security company. But I guess the real reason is for legal reasons. You legally have to have a license in order to conduct security.
Does your company still exist today?
Yes, it does.
And who is your largest client now?
My largest client is Mei Guo.
And who is Mei Guo?
That's the daughter of Miles Guo.
What does your job entail regarding Mei Guo?
Right now it just entails house security. At first it was for complete protection. But I guess, money got tighter, we had to scale back, but now it's basically house security. We just monitor their house and, do canvassing around their house, that kind of stuff. We no longer transport or provide executive protection, personal bodyguard protection for that.
And who other than Mei Guo do you protect?
It varies. We get contracts, very minimal contracts. But I had one for an executive in the city. We did 4-hour security detail for them. I've done security for other companies as well. We had one gentleman who needed security for jewelry. Was showing at a showcase, and that's really it.
Mr. Barnett, going back to Mei Guo, have you discussed your testimony with her?
No, I have not.
Has she ever asked you about what you would be testifying to?
No, she has not.
Have you ever talked to her about the details of this case?
No, I have not.
Have you ever talked to her about the arrest of her father?
Yes.
And in discussing that, did you discuss anything that had to do with your testimony today?
No.
And when was the last time you spoke to her about the arrest of her father?
Maybe about a week ago. I think I asked her how her father was doing.
And other than that, have you had any substantive discussions with her?
Not in regards to this case, no.
Mr. Barnett, did you ever work for Miles Guo?
Not directly, no.
So describe for us how you worked for him indirectly?
I worked originally, for a company called Golden Spring. Part of that job was guarding Miles Guo. The company later switched over to.
Let me stop you there. When did you start with Golden Spring?
October of 2020.
And prior to being hired by Golden Spring, did you have experience doing private security?
Yes. So once I retired from the police department in 2013, I went into security and executive protection. Basically the gentleman that I trained with. We work with celebrities and dignitaries, and I did that for a number of years. And then branched off to another company called Pro Protection, which was basically for.
The court said, "Sir, I'd like you to draw the microphone close to you so that everyone can hear you. Speak right into the microphone."
And then I went to Pro Protection, which is a company out in Long Island. It was just an easier commute. I got tired of guarding celebrities. That wasn't really something that I enjoyed very much, and then I had applied online. I can't remember where I applied through, whether it was Indeed. One of those websites for a company looking for executive protection. That was, I don't remember it saying the name of the company, but they were offering a certain salary. So I applied to it. And then I think in October, well, little before that. Beginning of October of 2020 is when they called me for that particular job in regards to Miles.
Were you hired at the first try?
No, I was not.
What was the reason why you weren't hired?
Well, this was a recruiting company. The reason that I was not hired was because of my date of birth, and that it was the year of the boar. And that was found to be, at least they told me, it was unlucky, so I was not hired for that reason.
And then subsequently were you hired despite being born in the year of the boar?
I think that was a year prior. So a year later I got a call. I actually didn't apply again. I just received a call, asked if I was still interested in the position.
And, Mr. Barnett, prior to this, were you an officer of the NYPD?
I was.
For how long were you an officer of the NYPD?
From 1997 to 2013.
And I won't ask you for all the details, could you just tell us? Just summarize very briefly what your experience was as an NYPD officer.
I started out as a regular police officer in East Flatbush, Brooklyn. Spent most of my time there, went to narcotics in Brooklyn North for a while, then went back to the 67. I don't remember what year it was. And then I got my first, I think I was injured the first time in 2008. And then went back to work. And then again I was injured in 2011. Where my shoulder was torn out again after struggling with somebody and the department decided to retire me at that time.
Mr. Barnett, did you serve for the United States?
Yes, ma'am.
Where did you serve?
The U.S. Navy.
And for how long?
I was only in for a year and 2 months. I fell 20 feet and shattered my wrist. Broke a bone in my left leg and my back, and they basically retired me at that point.
Mr. Barnett, do you have a lawyer?
Yes, I do.
And through your lawyer were you served with a subpoena to testify here today?
Yes, I was.
And was the subpoena from Mr. Kamraju's office?
I believe so.
And before you were served with the subpoena in this case, had you met with these 4 prosecutors who are seated at the table here?
Yes, I did.
And how many times did you meet with these 4 prosecutors?
Twice.
Did you have phone calls with these 4 prosecutors?
Yes, once.
Let me show you what is marked as DX60761. Do you recognize this document? And can I show Mr. Barnett the last page of this document as well?
Yes, I recognize it.
Ms. Shrofa said, defense moves DX60761 into evidence.
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, "Is this a document that he authored?"
Ms. Shrofa said, he signed it, Your Honor. Mr. Barnett, let's look at the last page. Is your signature there?
Yes.
Did you review this document?
I did with my attorney.
And did you also sign it several times, if you look at the right side?
I signed it in, it looks like, I only see one spot where I signed it.
Well, let's look at the date on the top. It's dated. Look at the date. And you signed it on that date. Correct?
Yes.
And you signed it on a second date at the corner, right?
I don't see where you're pointing to. Where it says April 11th, 24.
Yes.
That's correct.
Ms. Shrofa said, Your Honor, the defense moves the document into evidence.
Mr. Ferguson said, no objection. It's fine.
The court said, "It is admitted."
Defendant's Exhibit 67061 received in evidence.
The court said, "Did you assign a number to that?"
Ms. Shrofa said, Yes, Your Honor. DX67061. And may I please publish it to the jury?
The court said, go ahead.
Ms. Schrofa said, thank you. Mr. Barnett, prior to meeting with these prosecutors, did you review this document with your attorney and sign it?
Yes, I did.
And when you met with the prosecutors, did you tell them the truth?
Yes, I did.
And on April 11th, 2024, did you tell the prosecutors that when the Mawa property was purchased, Mr. Gwa told you?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection, Your Honor. He could testify. She can't ask him about out-of-court statements.
The court said, sustained.
What did you tell the prosecutors on April 11th of 2024?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection, it's hearsay.
The court said, it's hearsay.
On April 11th of 2024.
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
Ms. Schrofa said, I have not finished the question. Did the prosecutors ask you your understanding of certain events when you were working for and with Miles Gwa?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection to relevance.
The court said, you can answer that question. It's a yes or no answer, or I don't know, or I don't remember.
The witness said, yes, Your Honor.
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. I'll actually ask you a different question, Mr. Barnett. For the times that you met with the prosecutors, did they ask you questions about what you did for Miles Gwa?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
Did they ask you questions about your understanding of certain events?
Yes.
Did they ask you for your understanding about the purchase of Mawa?
I believe so. I can't remember exactly what was asked, but I believe so.
Well, let's see if we can refresh your recollection.
The court said, keep in mind, sir, that you cannot repeat the statements of others.
The witness said, yes, ma'am.
Ms. Schrofa said, let's show 006. Could you go down, please? Honor?
Mr. Ferguson said, is there a question pending, Your?
The court said, Ms. Schroff.
Ms. Schrofa said, we're trying to highlight the refresher portion of the document for the witness, and here we go. Does that document, just the question of whether or not this document refreshes your recollection as to whether or not you told these prosecutors?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection, he cannot say that.
The court said, he said he forgot or that he didn't remember.
Ms. Schrofa said, I'm sorry. Does this document refresh your recollection as to whether or not you were asked questions about why Mr. Miles purchased the Mawa property?
Yes.
It does?
Yes.
Thank you. You can take that down. Mr. Barnett, let's go to Miles Gwa. When was the first time you met Miles Gwa?
It would have, probably the first time that I met Mr. Gwa was at a residence in Connecticut when I was first got hired doing security there. I couldn't give you an exact date. I would assume it was about 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks after I started.
And Mr. Barnett, what was your salary when you started?
I believe it was $100,000 a year.
And when you started the job, did you know who Miles Gwa was?
No, I had looked it up, did an internet search before I was hired.
And did other people work security with you?
Yes, they did.
And who were those people?
The first gentleman was Greg Bernhardt was one of them. The second one was, we just called him Johnny, and the other one was Henry. I couldn't tell you their last names off the top of my head.
Mr. Barnett, did all of them have experience as prior NYPD officers?
One was ex-correction. I believe that was Johnny. Henry was ex-NYPD. And I believe Greg was ex-Nassau County Police Department.
Mr. Barnett, at that time who did you consider your boss to be?
Grace Young was my boss at this time.
And if somebody gave you direction, who did you confirm those directions with?
At that time I would have confirmed something with Grace unless I was directly told either by Mr. Gwa in regards to security. But anything that had to do with a direction, that we had to go in or we had to take somebody somewhere, it would have been by Grace at that time.
Mr. Barnett, after COVID, did your job duties change?
Yes, it did.
Could you tell us how?
It was more now executive protection where we were driving Mr. Gwa to the office at 64th Street in New York. And then either back home or to the residence in Connecticut or the residence in New York City.
And how many cars did you use to transport Mr. Gwa?
2.
What were the 2 cars?
It depends, but the first car was, I'm trying to think at that time.
It's all right. Did you have a general protocol as to how to transport Mr. Guo?
Mr. Guo was transported in one car. There was one armed security officer with him in the car. And then there was a driver. And then there was a backup car behind that car, and that was an armored Lexus.
Mr. Barnett, you testified that you would drive him to East 64th Street. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What was at East 64th Street?
Office building. It was called the Himalaya Exchange, I believe.
Did you ever hear anyone refer to that building as the townhouse?
No.
Did there come a time when you were promoted to Director of Security?
Yes.
When was that?
I believe it was June. It was after, I want to say, mid-June of 2021, I believe.
And did you get a raise along with that promotion?
I did.
And as part of your promotion, did your job responsibilities shift?
Yes, they did.
Did they expand?
Yes.
And as part of, what was your position then, and what was your job title?
My job was overall security of the office building. I can't remember. I believe at that time they had just moved into 3 Columbus Circle. But I can't be sure of the date on that. I was responsible for the security of that. There was security for a small warehouse in Manhattan that I had to oversee the guard there. I wasn't in charge of anybody else in there except for the security guard and his executive protection detail.
Mr. Barnett, let me show you what is marked as GXSB8. Do you recognize that document?
Yes, I do.
What is this document?
That's just the security assessment I did. This was prior to given the role of Director of Security.
And what is it? Is it a report?
It's just a report stating there were a lot of problems with the security as it was when I first started. There was a lack of organization where there was really basically a lack of leadership. The person who was my boss at this time, her name was Grace, had no security experience at all. And she was not very good at kind of managing security and managing her other duties. So we were kind of doing things on our own, and it was a little chaotic. It was not organized security, which was what I was used to.
Did you send this document to anyone?
Yes, I did.
To whom?
I believe I sent it to Grace, and I believe I sent it to Yvette.
And where did Grace work?
Grace worked at the office at 64th Street.
And what was at 64th Street? What company?
That was Golden Spring in the beginning.
And where did Yvette work?
The same office.
Did Golden Spring keep records like this at part of its business?
I have no idea.
Ms. Strofa said, Your Honor, we move Government Exhibit SB8 into evidence.
Mr. Ferguson said, objection, lack of foundation.
The court said, sustained.
Did you prepare documents that were security assessments on a regular basis?
At first there was only one security assessment that I did. After that, I did, if we had like an event coming up, I would do basically a small assessment of what was needed for that event. And then after a while, I didn't need the security assessment anymore because of the promotion that I received. We started to have a chain of command, so it wasn't really necessary at that time.
Mr. Barnett, did you refer to? Let me ask you an easier question. What did you call Mr. Guo?
Usually for the most part one called him sir. If I was texting with someone, usually it would have been symbolized with the letter P. If I was talking to Yvette directly, it would have been used the letter P, and that stood for principal. I've called him boss, usually those 3. Most of the time it was sir.
Who came up with the word principal?
That I don't know.
How about who came up with the word boss?
I don't know if anybody came up with that word. I think it was just common knowledge. Anybody that I would protect or anybody that was above me, I probably would have just called them boss. That may have been something from my earlier days in the police department. It was nothing.
So if you were protecting me, you'd call me boss?
Probably.
Mr. Barnett, as part of your security job, did you access different levels of risk?
At times I did, yes.
What are the different levels of risk in your opinion?
When we first started, I didn't really have much assessment. We had over the time. We started to see more and more of different individuals coming. Trying to get into the office on 64th Street without any type of authority, so we had most of that problem. We had a few people that would follow in cars when we were driving. You would see one car in particular was like a giant billboard that would drive around the block all the time.
Did you consider that to be a serious, medium, or low-risk threat?
At that time it was more of a medium threat. I didn't see anything severe. I was more concerned about the people showing up to the office trying to get in. That would have been more of a serious threat.
And while you worked there, were there occasions when people just left suspicious packages at the East 64th location?
I remember one in particular. There was one bag that we called the NYPD-4. And I think one of my security guys, I think he actually donned a helmet and went out there to look into the bag. But I don't believe there was anything of serious note in it.
Do you recall if there were any times when people who were armed tried to get into East 64th Street?
Not that I know of, no.
Mr. Barnett, how long did you work for Miles Gua?
I started in October of 2020 and worked for him all the way up to, I guess that would be March of 2023.
And how would you describe him as an employer?
In all honesty, one of the better people that I worked for. And the reason I say that is because he's very cordial, very courteous, thought about. He seemed to care about his security detail. You don't see that a lot when you do executive protection. Especially for high net worth individuals. They tend to treat you subpar. I don't know if that's the best word to use. He was never like that. He was always very courteous. He was a gentleman.
How did you communicate with him?
Usually we'd have sporadic conversation. It was not anything at length. If I had to really talk to him, I would have to use someone to translate.
How was his English?
It was okay. It took me a while to get an ear for it. It wasn't great. So it took me a little while to understand what he was saying sometime. Especially if he was behind me in the back seat in the car and I'm in the front. It was hard.
Mr. Barnett, did you use any sort of apps to communicate with Mr. Gua?
Yes, we used WhatsApp.
And did Mr. Gua have the same number throughout the time that you worked for him, the same phone number?
No, I don't believe so.
And what was your experience with his phone numbers? Could you tell the jury?
Well, Mr. Gua would switch his phones. He would explain that his phones had been hacked by the Chinese government. So he would switch his phone semi-regularly. It wasn't that often, but it was semi-regularly.
Mr. Barnett, did there come a time when you learned about something called the new federal state of China?
Yes.
And what did you understand it to be?
Basically, my understanding of it was that Miles was trying to create a new order for a Chinese people. He wanted to take down basically the Chinese Communist Party based on, different issues. But in regards to the new federal state of China, that was kind of it's going to be his new foundation for all the Chinese people.
Did you believe he was sincere in his efforts?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection, he can't testify to the sincerity of the defendant.
Ms. Schrofa said, I'm asking about his understanding of what he viewed of Miles Gua, Your Honor.
The court said you can answer.
Yes, I thought he was sincere about it, yes.
Mr. Barnett, do you recall if you provided security for an event at the World Trade Center?
Yes, I did.
What year was that?
I believe that was June 4th of 2021, don't quote me on the date, but I thought that's what it was.
Do you recall who was present there?
Yes, for the most part one couldn't tell you everybody. That's for sure.
And, Mr. Barnett, on June 4th of 2021, did the Mawa property exist?
No, not that I know of, no.
Mr. Barnett, did your job require you to go to Sherry, Netherlands?
Yes, it did.
What was Sherry, Netherlands?
That was a residence, one of the residences that Miles stayed at.
Mr. Barnett, did you provide security in that? Is it an apartment building?
Yes, it is. It's a hotel/apartment building.
Did you provide security within that building?
Sometimes, not all the time. We weren't there 24/7 because they had security downstairs. There was no need for us to stay there overnight.
Mr. Barnett, and part of your duties or job description was to drive Mr. Gua, correct?
That's correct.
And did there come a time when there were 2 cars that were purchased to ensure the security of Mr. Gua?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection to the leading.
By Ms. Schrofa.
Were 2 cars purchased?
The court said, "You may answer that question."
I don't know which 2 cars you're referring to.
You tell us which cars were purchased?
There's 2 cars that my company purchased.
Which were those?
2 BMWs.
And when was that?
I believe that was January of 2023.
Do you know who ordered those 2 BMWs?
Yes, I did.
And who paid for them?
Well, I paid for them out of the funding from HCHK.
Do you know how much it cost?
Each car was, with tax I believe, was about $165,000.
Were those 2 BMWs used to transport anyone, any other people?
Yes, at different times, but for the most part they were used to transport Miles.
And who other than Miles did they transport?
I've transported Yvette in those cars. If we had an event we probably would have transported someone from that event. But I can't give you an exact name on that.
How many events do you recall? I'll withdraw that. Was part of your job to transport people back and forth from events?
Yes.
And were these events related to the new federal state of China? Honor.
Mr. Ferguson said, objection to the leading again, your.
The court said, "What were the events related to?"
What were these events related to?
The first one that we did was new federal state of China. There was an event for Himalaya coin. There was another event for I believe it was after the purchase of the house in Moa if I'm not mistaken. And there were a few other events here and there, but I couldn't tell you what they were for.
Mr. Barnett, did Miles Guo know how to drive?
I believe he did. I seen him drive.
Where did you see him drive?
I saw him drive once when we were looking at a property. He drove a car around the property. That's about the only time I've seen him drive.
Did you ever see him drive on a road?
Maybe once, but I can't recall when that was.
Mr. Barnett, do you recall seeing any motorcycles while you guarded Mr. Guo?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection to the leading.
Did you see any other vehicles while you were guarding Mr. Guo?
Yes.
What other vehicles did you see?
I saw motorcycles. There was other cars. There was a Rolls-Royce. There was a Lamborghini. There was a other Mercedes, a van.
Let's start with the motorcycle. Do you know what the motorcycles were used for?
They weren't used. Originally they were going to be purchased to use for.
Could you keep your voice up for me?
They were going to be used originally, for he was doing a lot of music videos. Like that kind of stuff. The reason that no one used them was because they were in my name.
And why was that a problem for other people to use something that was in your name?
The main reason why they were put in my name, not only, was I was the only one that had a motorcycle license. The problem I had with it was that anybody that wanted to use them didn't have a motorcycle license and it was under my name. And God forbid something were to happen, I would be liable.
Did you watch any videos in which these motorcycles features?
No. Because the first video that I was actually privy to didn't have the motorcycle at that time.
And were these motorcycles purchased for just use by Mr. Guo or for other people as well?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
Originally they were purchased for Mr. Guo from what I remember.
And did that ever change?
It did. So it came to, I believe I was approached by Yvette. And I can't remember if Max was there or not. But, anyway, they wanted to rent out the motorcycles. Meaning they wanted to have some of the supporters be able to rent these. Not really rent them. But sign them out and use them. And I immediately put a stop to that because, again, they were in my name. And it wasn't a rental service.
Where were these motorcycles initially kept?
Initially they were kept in Connecticut.
Were they moved?
Yes, we moved them. I moved them to the house in New Jersey. Scratch that. I believe I drove one of them to the house in New Jersey, and the other ones we had a trailer.
So these motorcycles, Mr. Barnett, are they now still in your name?
I believe one still is according to what an attorney told me the other day.
And where's the other one?
Say again.
And whose name is the other one in now?
I have no idea. I turned those over to Max Krasner. I don't remember what the date was. I want to say it was sometime in 2023, but I couldn't tell you what date that was.
You mentioned a Lamborghini, correct?
Yes.
What was the plan with the Lamborghini?
I have no idea. At one point I know when they were talking about the motorcycle being rented, sorry. I keep use the word rented. It was meant to be signed out, almost like someone wanted to use something. It's the same thing with the Lamborghini. That's the only time I ever heard plans with that Lamborghini. Otherwise, it wasn't really discussed that I know of.
When you say signed out, were you ever given like a sign-out sheet that someone would have to fill out too?
That never came to fruition. I was not having that.
You were not having that?
No.
Mr. Barnett, do you recall learning anything about a Bugatti?
I remember hearing about it. But I didn't really have much to do in regards to purchase or anything like that with it.
Do you know what it was for, whom it was bought?
No, I don't.
Mr. Barnett, do you have any knowledge of an entity called G-Clubs?
Yes, I know about it.
What is G-Clubs?
I can only tell you the way it was explained to me. It's basically a club that you paid for. Almost like any type of country club or anything, and you receive services for that. Whether it be, I believe it was money off of clothing. I thought there was something about there were trips that you could win or something like that. I don't know the full extent of what it entailed.
Mr. Barnett, did you know anything about any boats while you worked for Mr. Gua?
Yes.
What boats did you know about?
There was the only boat that I had any dealings with was. I believe it was the Lady May too, and there was a boat that came later that was called Liberty.
What do you recall about the Liberty?
I don't know much about the purchase of the Liberty. I remember when we had actually arrived. It had massive amounts of problems with it. It was not very seaworthy. And the only reason I know that was from speaking to the captain of the boat at that time.
Did the fellow fighters or supporters use the Liberty?
Yes.
When?
It was different occasions to do broadcasting. I couldn't tell you the dates.
Do you know somebody named Princely?
Yes, I do.
Who is Princely or is Princely?
I don't know his official title. To me he was kind of almost what I would consider like a team lead for the supporters.
And did he take the Liberty out with the supporters?
I believe so, yes.
Now, Mr. Barnett, are you familiar with a property called Mawa?
Yes.
Did you ever visit Mawa?
Yes, many times.
And when was your first visit to Mawa?
I don't believe I know the date, but it had to be early of 2022. I don't recall the date.
Was that before or after its purchase?
I went there once before I believe it was purchased. I don't know the date it was actually purchased, but I believe I was there before.
Do you recall who you were there with?
I was there with I know it was Miles. I thought Yvette was there. And the owner of the Moa residence was there. I can't remember his name.
Did you ask Mr. Gua if he was going?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection to the leading, Your Honor.
Ms. Schrofa said, it's a question. Did you ask Mr. Gua if he was going to buy that property?
No, I did not ask him that, no.
Did Mr. Gua ever volunteer to you for whom he was buying that property?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection to the hearsay.
The court said so. Once again, this would be a yes or no or I don't know or I don't recall kind of a question. It's not a question where you repeat what you were told. You understand?
The witness said, yes, ma'am.
The court said, go ahead.
Yes.
Were you surprised when Mr. Gua purchased that property?
Yes.
Why?
It just didn't seem like his type of property, but that's just my own personal take on it.
And why did it not seem like his type of property?
I always felt that Mr. Gua liked properties that had an intense amount of land. This was. In this particular property, even though it was on 12 acres, it was surrounded basically by a neighborhood. It wasn't easy to secure due to that problem. And for those reasons, it was very ornate. It just didn't seem like a property that I felt that something he would purchase.
Did Mr. Gua ever tell you whether the property was for him or for someone else?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, here we go again. This is one of those questions where you can't say what he said. You can say yes, no. I don't recall. I don't know.
The witness said, yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Mr. Barnett, were you asked similar questions such as the ones I've just asked you by the government when you met with them during proffer sessions?
Mr. Ferguson said, asked and answered.
Ms. Schrofa said, "Not these questions."
The court said, "Overruled. You may answer."
I believe so, but I can't remember everything that I was asked.
Ms. Schrofa said, "Well, let's show him 006 again."
Mr. Ferguson said, "Your Honor, we'll stipulate that we asked him about Mullah just to speed things along."
Ms. Schrofa said, "Are they going to stipulate to what he said back?"
Mr. Ferguson said, "No, because it's hearsay."
The court said, "I don't think so."
When you met with the government and you were asked these questions, was your lawyer present?
Yes, he was.
And after you answered all of their questions, did they accuse you of not telling the truth?
Not to me, or at least not to my attorney, not that I know of.
And how many times did the government talk to you about these topics?
Mr. Ferguson said, asked and answered.
The court said, "Sustained."
Mr. Barnett, were you anticipating being a witness at this trial for the United States Attorney's Office?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, "Sustained."
Were you told by the United States Attorney's Office that you would be called as a witness?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, "Sustained."
Mr. Barnett, when did I first reach out to you?
I believe it was after I received a subpoena to testify.
I know, but when? This month, last month?
Last month, right, yeah, June I believe.
You remember which week of June?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
Mr. Barnett, in all the times that you worked for Mr. Gua, did he live at the MAWA facility?
No, he did not live there. He stayed there, but he did not live there.
What was the longest period of time that he ever stayed there?
I believe about 4 or 5 days at most.
And what did he do during those 4 or 5 days?
Mostly he would broadcast for the most part.
Did you ever see Mr. Gua's wife at MAWA?
Yes.
And what was your perception of her at MAWA?
In my perception she did not like it very much.
And did she look happy while she was there?
Not that I know of. I didn't think that she looked it there. I couldn't tell you whether she looked happy or not. I got the impression she did not like it.
What is your impression based on?
Just communication between kind of husband and wife. It doesn't really matter what language it is. Sometimes you can just tell.
Body language?
Body language and verbal cues. My wife gives them to me all the time.
Sorry about that. Mr. Barnett, did you ever see Mr. Gua's son at MAWA?
No.
Have you seen Mr. Gua's son in all the time that you've ever worked for him?
Yes, I saw him one time.
What time, in which year?
It was when I first started in 2020. I believe he was at the residence in Connecticut. But we did not know that he was there. I was actually surprised when I saw him walking up the driveway. I didn't know who he was.
And after that, have you ever seen him at the Connecticut residence?
No.
How about Sherry Netherland?
No.
How about MAWA?
No.
Mr. Ferguson said, objection, Your Honor.
The court said, "Overruled."
How about at 3cc?
The court said, "He has stated that he never saw him again."
Did you see Mr. Miles Gua's daughter at these places?
I saw his daughter at the house in New Jersey in MAWA.
And how many days did you see her there for?
Not many, maybe she would visit for a day, maybe 2 at most. But I believe it wasn't more than a day, and she would leave.
Do you know somebody named Wayne?
Yes, I do.
Who is Wayne?
Wayne is the fiancé of May.
Did he live there?
No, he did not.
Now, Mr. Barnett, is it fair to say that it's a pretty big house?
Yes, it is.
Could you describe the house for us? It might be less leading.
The house sits on 12 acres. It's up on a hill. When you pull around the driveway. As you come up the driveway, there's a security house on the right. As you pull up the gate, you go up a hill. As you go up the hill and you enter on the front of the residence as you walk in, it's just a giant living room. Basically there's a giant living in the front. And then off to the right would have been where the kitchen is. And then off to the left was where there was an office, and then that was the main floor. I'm sorry. Are you asking me what it was like when I first went there or what it's like after some of the renovation were done?
I was asking you what it was like when you first went there. I can interrupt you if I may.
Okay.
Mr. Barnett, were there cameras at MAWA when you first saw it?
Yes, there were.
And as part of did you have a job at MAWA at some point?
Yes. So I was tasked with redoing all the security at MAWA. The security cameras and the equipment there were very substandard. And for something that size, you really needed to have a complete overhaul of all the security systems, cameras, internet, and stuff like that.
Mr. Barnett, do you need some water? Do you have water there?
I don't know. Do I have water here? I'm good. Go ahead.
Were you in charge of installing the camera system?
No, I was not.
And did you pick the vendors who would install the camera system?
Yes, I did.
And which vendor did you pick?
Company was called Prevnetis.
Was that a company? It's fine. How long did you supervise the installation of the cameras?
Some days. I wasn't there every day, so.
Could you tell us what was the rest of your work while you were in charge of MAWA?
So at first it was really just doing the security system. Unfortunately, what ended up happening? The amount of construction that was going on with all the different vendors that were coming in. All my security guys had to keep track of which vendors were coming in. And then we had to worry about who was coming in with those vendors. We had one MS-13 gang member that had to be removed, stuff like that. But for the most part one had left that to another one of my team leads to kind of oversee that.
Now, for how long were you in charge of overseeing things at MAWA?
I guess when it first started, I don't remember the date of start. I know it ended in September of 2023 for me.
Mr. Barnett, what were the types of things? Was the house in good shape?
No, it was not.
Could you use that mic for me?
It was not in good shape.
Was authority of your job to put it in shape?
No. My job was to oversee the construction. Make sure that the contractors were doing what they're supposed to do. Basically just keeping track of make sure nobody was doing anything wrong. More of like a security role than it was overseeing contractors.
Mr. Barnett, were their names attributed to different rooms within the facility?
Yes.
What were the names?
I'd have to look at the map, but the ground floor I don't remember that having a name. The second floor, one side was Miles' wing. The other side was Madam's wing, which was Miles's wife. And I believe on the third floor one side was for May, and the other side was for his son.
Were those the names given to the 4 areas of the 2 floors?
I believe so, on the security map they were I believe.
Did you have a security map?
I did, yes.
Who created the security map, do you know?
Prevnetis, they did a security assessment.
And they created the map?
Yes, it was taken off of blueprints, but they created the name on the map, correct.
Was there construction done to create more bedrooms on the first floor?
On the first floor.
Mr. Ferguson said, "Objection, Your Honor."
The court said, what was the nature of the construction on the first floor?
Or any floor for that matter while you worked there? Go ahead and tell us.
There wasn't a whole lot of construction at first. On the first floor, the main floor. Most of the construction was on the second and third floor I believe.
How many bathrooms all told were on the second floor, do you know?
There was definitely 2. It might have been 3, but I know there definitely were 2.
And did there come a time when there were meetings held at MAWA?
Yes.
And who was present for those meetings?
Mr. Ferguson said, "Your Honor, objection. I think we may need a sidebar."
The court said, all righty. Step up.
Continued on next page. At the sidebar.
Mr. Ferguson said, "I assume this is post-indictment, post-arrest meetings what you're getting at?"
Mr. Camacho said, no. No. It's pre-arrest, pre-indictment.
Mr. Ferguson said, "Sorry."
The court said, okay.
Continued on next page. In open court.
The court said, you may answer.
Ms. Schrofa.
Yes.
Mr. Barnett, was Miles Gua present for that meeting?
For that particular meeting I'm thinking of, yes.
Who else was there with Miles Gua just generally? Try and describe for us who was there.
The meeting I'm thinking of is more of in the beginning of the residence. But I'm pretty sure there were certain supporters there. And I thought Yvette was there, I'm almost positive. But that's all I can remember. I don't remember who else was there.
And during that meeting, was there a broadcast that was undertaken?
There may have been. That I don't recall.
Mr. Barnett, do you know which entity bought the property that has been referred to as MAWA?
Yes, Taurus Fund purchased the property.
Did you have a role at the Taurus Fund?
I did not have a role at the Taurus Fund.
Did you have a signatory role at the Taurus Fund?
Yes, I did. I was unaware of that, but yes, I did.
And what was the signatory role that you had?
Well, apparently, which I didn't find out until much later, that I was the manager. One of the managers of the fund.
Did you sign a document that made you a manager of the Taurus Fund?
Yes, I did.
Did there come a time when that property was to be transferred out of the Taurus Fund into another fund?
Yes, for my understanding it was to be transferred to HCHK Properties.
Mr. Barnett, while you worked at the MAWA facility, did you do any work with the guardhouse?
I'm sorry.
Did you have any work done on the guardhouse?
Yes.
What work did you have done?
The guardhouse was it was gutted. We had to create what's called a security operations center inside that house. And then the rest of the house was just being redone. The house was in complete disarray. There was mold in it. It was in really bad shape.
Could you tell the jury what is a license plate reader?
A license plate reader is basically a camera that picks up a license plate. If it was a police department, it would actually pick up the license plate and tell you all the information registered to that particular license plate. Civilian-wise, you can't do that, so basically it reads the actual license plate. Lets you know how many times that license plate's been there. And you can actually, on a computer, you can make it so that if that license plate appears, it will notify you that there is a problem if you don't want that particular car in your area.
Did you install a license plate reader in MAWA?
It was installed. I didn't personally install it.
Do you know when it was installed?
I believe it was later. I want to say more towards August or September of 23. That I don't know for sure.
Mr. Barnett, do you recall that do you know what a non-disclosure agreement is?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
That's basically an agreement stating that the gist of it is whatever you see or hear. Whatever, it's to be kept confidential.
Did you sign one?
Not for MAWA, no, I did not.
Did vendors who came to the MAWA facility sign them?
Yes, everybody had to sign them.
And was there a reason? Did you have an understanding of why there was such a focus on security at MAWA?
Well, it was just because of basically the size of the property. And we were more concerned with the safety of the property and Miles' safety for the most part.
And why were you concerned about Miles' safety?
That was my job, to make sure that he was protected.
Do you know somebody named Sean Jing?
I'm sorry.
Do you know somebody named Sean?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Who did he work for?
I believe he worked for HCHK. I don't know whether it was properties or technologies. I don't have that answer.
Mr. Barnett, in January of 2023, did you perceive a security threat?
January of 2023, I don't recall that date.
Ms. Strofa said, well, let me show you something that might help you recall. Let me show you DX60686. Could you scroll down for him, please? It's just for the witness. Thank you, and the court and the government. If you could just scroll down. Does that document refresh your recollection?
Yes, it does.
Ms. Strofa said, you could take that down, please. And could you tell us what security threat you perceived in January of 2023?
I received a call from my team lead. His name is Tom Carino.
Sick. He stated that he had received a call. I don't remember whether it was from Yvette or it was from...
Mr. Ferguson said, we object to the hearsay, Your Honor.
Ms. Strofa said, it's not being offered for the truth of the matter.
Mr. Ferguson said, really?
The court said, if he is, sir, don't repeat anything that was said to you.
The witness said, okay.
What did you do?
Basically I instructed them to take Mrs. Gua and May to New Jersey. The New Jersey residence, because I felt like that would be the most secure place if someone was following them.
How long did they stay at the secure place in New Jersey?
I believe a few hours. I don't have an exact time.
And then where did you take them back?
Back to their residence in Connecticut.
Mr. Barnett, moving forward to June 2022, was the construction still going on at the MAWA facility?
Yes.
And how focused? Was it light construction work or heavy construction work?
It was always heavy construction work going on.
Now, Mr. Barnett, sitting here today, do you recall if around June of 2022, whether there was another meeting at MAWA residence that you supervised?
I don't recall that. There may have been. I just don't recall.
Sitting here today, do you recall if there was a lunar celebration at MAWA?
Yes.
When was that?
I don't know the date of that, but there was, yes.
Could you describe what the celebration looked like over there?
I don't think I was present at that celebration.
Did you provide security for the celebration?
Yes.
And what security did you provide?
I believe it was security that was already there. That would have been my team lead Tom Carino and who was on duty that day.
The court said, "Speak into the microphone."
Tom Carino and whoever was on duty that day that was securing the estate.
Mr. Barnett, as part of your job duty for Mr. Gua, did you scout out properties for him to view?
Yes, I scouted out offices and warehouses.
Could you keep your voice up? You scouted out offices and what?
Offices and warehouse.
What else?
I scouted out homes as well.
Where did you scout out homes?
Most of the scouting I did, it was online. One was in Arizona. One was in Colorado. I think there was one in Texas as well.
And were these properties that you were scouting, was it your understanding that they were for?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, "Sustained."
Describe what directions you.
The court said, "Sustained."
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, "Don't repeat anything that was said to you."
Ms. Schrofa said, "Your Honor, may we have a sidebar?"
The court said, "Okay."
Continued on next page. At the sidebar,
Mr. Kamaraju said, "I wasn't sure what the basis of the hearsay objection is to a direction from Mr. Gua. Under U.S. v. De Maria, a direction is not hearsay."
The court said, "I'm waiting for the direction to be, get me a house for G Club, something like that."
Mr. Kamaraju said, she didn't even get a chance to ask the question as to what the direction was.
The court said, anticipating what his answer would be, I sustained an objection.
Mr. Kamaraju said, "I'm sorry, Your Honor. I'm being slow on this. If the objection is to hearsay, then don't we have to hear what the direction was going to be?"
The court said, "Well then the jury would hear that and that can be a problem."
Mr. Kamaraju said, "I'm not sure how we can ever get to it if the direction was for G Club or for fellow fighters or for anybody else. I don't know how to ask that question, I guess, is my point."
Ms. Schrofa said, "Your Honor, we have to be candid. We have no idea what his answer is going to be. We didn't have the level of access to Mr. Barnett that the government did. They know what he is going to say. We don't know. We were not allowed to prep these witnesses."
Mr. Ferguson said, "Your Honor, my understanding is that he is prepped with them. I think that's superly incorrect. They also have the 302s. But that aside, I think Your Honor is exactly right. There can be mixed statements where what is sort of clothed as a command is really an assertion of truth. Meaning, these are for G clubs like Your Honor's example. That is still hearsay. It isn't permissible. It is a proper objection that the question calls for hearsay because that is like Your Honor clearly discerned what is coming.
The court said, "You want to get out that these potential properties had a certain purpose. That is the reason you're asking these questions?"
Mr. Kamaraju said, "We are entitled to get out that Mr. Gua directed people to look for properties for a certain purpose. That's not hearsay. That's both his state of mind and his direction."
The court said, "You can ask, did you receive directions to look for properties for certain purposes without his naming the purpose?"
Mr. Kamaraju said, "Your Honor, maybe I'm not understanding. If part of the hearsay exception is for his state of mind as well as his direction, then I don't understand how the purpose is not appropriate."
The court said, "You want to get this in for the truth of the matter. That's the reason that I don't buy any other reason."
Mr. Kamaraju said, that's why I come back to the De Maria case. He was here to buy cheap cigarettes. That was the intention that was expressed in the statement that the Second Circuit said. So the Second Circuit said, even though there is some argument that could be viewed as he's really there for the purpose of buying cigarettes. It went to his state of mind. It's the same concept.
The court said, so he's acting as a scout. And what exactly did you expect that he would say about what he was thinking about?
Ms. Shrofa said, he was told to look for properties that were large, that had land attached to them. That had height to them so that there would be dwellings on the top and dwellings below. The point of the properties was to make sure that there was room for everyone to live if they so wanted. The property was such to have zoning that would allow for the building of new structures. And I want to be clear because the government just said that what I said was superly incorrect or something like that. The defense has had one meeting with his lawyer and him. And we have not had access to him after that because his lawyer has been on vacation in the Poconos and has no phone service. And we have not spoken to somebody who is represented by counsel without them being present. This is what I am surmising would be his answer. More importantly, under De Maria, the fact that he has a state of mind and he knows that Miles Gua is looking for property that is of a certain type and for a certain purpose is properly admissible. Your Honor.
The court said, as a generality, absolutely. Were you given certain criteria with respect to the property? He's going to say yes. Did you apply that criteria when you searched online? He's going to say yes.
Mr. Kamaraju said, Your Honor. I'm going to maintain the objection because I think the appropriate solution is a limiting instruction. It's not the exclusion of the testimony. If the court has concerns that the testimony could be taken by the jury or even argued by defense counsel, then I believe that the proper course is not exclusion. It's a limiting instruction. Or an objection by the government if I try to do that in summation.
The court said, are you telling me that in summation you will not be trying to use his testimony about the purpose of the properties for the truth?
Mr. Kamaraju said, I'm going to be saying, this is what Miles Gua thought. That's a classic state of mind statement. That's what I'm going to say. You want to know what Miles Gua thought? This is how you know what Miles Gua thought. If Miles Gua was wrong, he was wrong, but that's what he thought. That's what I'm going to say in summation.
Mr. Ferguson said, I think Your Honor's proposal was correct. I think Your Honor recognized earlier. This case is in a different universe than the De Maria case, and it just doesn't have any traction in a case like that. And particularly the context like this person is just following orders. The purpose is the effect. It's not what he was told about why, it's what he did.
Ms. Shrofa said, he was told why.
The court said, he was told why, and so he took certain steps. He put certain words into the search bar when he was looking at these properties. He put it in a certain price. He put in certain criteria concerning use of the property.
Ms. Shrofa said, right. Is the court's ruling that I may not inquire into what the purpose of the property was?
The court said correct.
Ms. Shrofa said, and I may not inquire about the specific terms that he put into the search?
The court said correct.
Ms. Shrofa said, and I could not inquire as to what this witness's understanding is of Mr. Gua's state of mind at the time he gave those directives?
The court said correct.
Ms. Shrofa said, so I think that is in conflict with De Maria. That's our position, Your Honor.
Continued on next page. In open court. By Ms. Shrofa.
Mr. Barnett, were you given certain criteria when you were directed to look for properties, just yes or no?
Yes.
And who gave you those directives or directions criteria?
Miles Gua.
And did you, without telling us what they were, did you use that criteria to look for properties?
Yes, I did.
And what properties did you find?
Again, I found a property in Texas. I found a property.
Could you take a minute and describe for the jury the property that you found in Texas?
The one that I found in Texas was extremely large property. I believe it was about 600 acres. I believe it already had an airstrip on it, and I don't recall much about the residents on the property. I just remember it being very large.
What other states did you Did you look for properties in? That was a bad question. But I think you get it.
I looked for properties in Arizona as well as Colorado.
Tell us about the property that you found in Arizona.
The properties that I found in Arizona, actually visited the property with Miles Gua.
I'm sorry.
I visited the property with Miles Gua.
And could you describe the property for us?
It was a large property. One part of it was up on a hill and it cascaded down almost like into a valley, and it was in Sedona.
What other state did you look for property in?
Colorado was the other state that I found property.
Did you look for property in Connecticut?
I looked at properties in Connecticut. I believe that was with Mr. Gua though.
Without telling us what it was, did you have an understanding of what the purpose of these properties was?
Yes.
And from whom did you get that understanding?
Mr. Gua.
After you found these properties, did you communicate information about these properties to others?
Yes.
To whom?
The court said, "All right. It's now 2:30, so we'll take our half-hour break. Remember that you're not allowed to discuss the case amongst yourselves. Don't permit anyone to discuss it in your presence. Don't read, listen to or watch anything from any source that touches on the subject matter of this case. Sir, you can step out. Don't discuss your testimony."
The law clerk said, "Jury exiting."
Jury not present.
The court said, "Please be seated. Is there anything before we return at 3 p.m.?
Mr. Ferguson said, "Not from the government."
Ms. Schrofa said, "Not from us, Your Honor." Thank you.
The court said, "Okay."
Recess.
The court said, "Please be seated."
Ms. Schrofa said, "Your Honor, may I run to go get the witness?"
The court said, "Yes, go ahead. Except Ms. Schroff?"
Ms. Schrofa said, "Yes, Your Honor."
The court said, "I want to make a ruling before you do that. Can someone else get the witness?"
Ms. Schrofa said, "Sure."
The court said, "All righty. I have reviewed the transcript in case law, and I will permit the defense to pursue a broader line of questioning, broader than what I had indicated at the sidebar. The defense seeks to ask Scott Barnett what directions he received from Mr. Gua when searching for a property. Mr. Barnett may testify that Mr. Gua told him to look for a property with certain characteristics. Such instructions constitute commands and are, therefore, not hearsay. Oh, would the witness please exit?
The witness said, "Oh, I'm sorry."
The court said, see United States v. Belomo, 176 F.3d 580, 586, 2dr 1999. I will permit the defense to elicit the specific criteria that Mr. Gua gave to Mr. Barnett. Mr. Barnett may also testify that Mr. Gua told him why he was seeking a property with those criteria. Although this would not constitute a command, such a statement would be indicative of Gua's then existing state of mind, such as motive, intent, or plan under Rule 8033. So long as the statement is forward-looking and not backward-looking, it is admissible under the state of mind hearsay exception pursuant to United States v. De Maria, 727 F.2d, 265, 270-71, 2dr 1984. So now you may bring the witness back.
Mr. Kamraju said, "Thank you, Your Honor. We'll get him."
Witness present.
The court said, "All righty. Let's have the jurors come in, please."
Jury present.
The court said, "Please be seated. Remember, sir, that you're still under oath."
The witness said, "Yes, ma'am."
The court said, "You may continue the inquiry."
Ms. Schrofa said, "Thank you, Your Honor."
By Ms. Schrofa.
Mr. Barnett, before we broke, we were discussing the criteria you were given when looking for these properties. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And could you tell the jury what criteria you were given while searching for these properties?
The basic criteria had to be a large property. Had to be able to house numerous people, over 1,000 is really the extent of it. It had to have the capabilities of being able to have numerous houses on it, as well as having access both by vehicle and airplane.
And did you look for properties that met that criteria?
Yes.
And Mr. Barnett, did Mr. Gua tell you why it is that he was looking for these types of properties?
Yes, he did.
Why?
It was explained to me that Mr. Guo felt that the best way to put it is the world as we know it was not going to be sustainable with COVID and the vaccines. He felt like that there would be a lot of deaths, there would be a lot of chaos. The world would go into massive turmoil. And he wanted to have places set up for, as he called it, his people. So that they would have places to go when this happened.
And who were his people?
The Chinese people, meaning his supporters.
His what?
Supporters.
And did he tell you what other reasons he was looking for these properties?
Well, primarily it was for that reason. The reason for the access for airplanes and that nature was to be able to go to and from these properties. As well as bring in supplies, as needed.
And you mentioned it had to have space for 1,000 people. Did you have an understanding of who these 1,000 people would be?
My understanding was, for the way it was described to me, was over 50,000 supporters. But I don't have exact names of who it would be or, which people would go where.
Mr. Barnett, you testified about a property that you looked at in Colorado, correct?
That's correct.
And could you describe that property for me?
It was a large property. I don't recall the acreage. It had already had a runway on it. I believe it was a grass runway, if I remember correctly. I believe it already had different homes on it. But I'm a little fuzzy about the details of the exact property. I just remember it being very large. And I don't know, I remember the price tag being quite big I couldn't tell you exact amount. But it was definitely 200 million, give or take. I don't know the exact amount.
Ms. Schrofa said, Your Honor, could I just have a minute?
Counsel conferred.
Mr. Barnett, did you visit the Colorado property or did you just research it online?
I just saw it online. I did not visit it.
Mr. Barnett, you testified about the property in New Jersey. You remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And were you aware of an anticipated purchase of a restaurant also close to that property?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, sustained. Don't lead.
Mr. Barnett, were you told to look for the purchase of any other property in Mahwah, New Jersey? The area of Mahwah, New Jersey?
Yes, I looked at other properties in Mahwah.
And what were those properties?
The properties I looked at was mostly like office space and warehouses.
And what else?
There was one restaurant that I think that, referring to. But I don't believe it was for sale.
Mr. Barnett, as part of your job description at Mahwah, do you recall purchasing any ready-to-eat meals in large quantities?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection to leading.
The court said, you may answer.
I personally purchased not in large quantities basic different types of meals to kind of show Mr. Guo. What they were. And then if he had approved those, and it was approved by Yvette, then we would have purchased a bunch of them. We were looking into it, but we never purchased them.
And who were you going to purchase them for?
For the plan that Mr. Guo had already wanted to do in regards to having like different survival areas for the supporters.
The court said, what do you mean by survival areas?
The witness said, I considered the properties in regards to what he was looking for, was almost like survival areas for what his vision was as to what the world was going to become. That's kind of why I call it that.
The court said, so in case there were some crisis, is that what you're saying?
The witness said, that's correct.
The court said, go ahead.
By Ms. Schrofa.
Mr. Barnett, let me show you what is Defense Exhibit 60678A. Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
What is it?
I believe it's one of the properties that we were looking at.
And where is this property located, do you recall?
I believe that one was in Arizona.
Ms. Schrofa said, Your Honor, the defense moves DX 60678A into evidence.
Mr. Ferguson said, may we briefly voir dire, Your Honor?
The court said, you may.
Mr. Ferguson said, who prepared this document?
The witness said, I have no idea.
Mr. Ferguson said, we object.
By Ms. Schrofa.
Do you recognize the document regardless of who prepared it?
I recognized the property from seeing it before, but I never visited the property. Nor did I pick out that property myself.
Ms. Schrofa said, okay, let's scroll down. Scroll down. And keep going. Do you recall reviewing this property for purchase by Mr. Guo for fellow supporters?
Yes, that I remember. I remember that specific picture that you're showing now.
Ms. Strofa said, Your Honor, we move again to have the document admitted.
The court said, Are you saying that it consists of only those 2 pages that he just identified?
Ms. Strofa said, No, it's a larger document. I'm happy to have him scroll through it to see if he recognizes the entire document.
The court said, He would need to do that before it's admitted.
Ms. Strofa said, Okay. Can you keep scrolling down, please, Jorge? Keep scrolling down. Do you recognize that document now, Mr. Barnett?
Yes, I do.
Ms. Strofa said, Okay. The defense moves to admit it into evidence.
The court said, I just don't know how far you've gotten through the document. There's some photographs. I don't know if there's written language.
Do you recognize the document as it's unfolding before you?
I do recognize it. I can't tell you that I recognize every single picture. But I do recognize the document.
Ms. Strofa said, Your Honor, we renew the motion to admit the document into evidence.
The court said, Was that the full document?
Ms. Strofa said, Yes, Your Honor.
The court said, And do you recognize the full document?
The witness said, Your Honor, I recognize some of the photos in that document. I can't tell you that I recognize all the photos.
The court said, What percentage do you recognize?
The witness said, It's definitely over 50%, Your Honor.
The court said, I'll admit it. Go ahead.
Defendant's Exhibit DX 60678A received in evidence.
Ms. Strofa said, Your Honor. Is this the property that you scouted, Mr. Barnett?
It's one of the properties that was shown to me. I did not find this property personally.
Ms. Strofa said, And may we publish it to the jury, please? We can just keep scrolling, please. Mr. Barnett, sitting here today, do you recall sending this brochure to someone?
I believe I sent this to Yvette. I know it was shown to Miles. And also I think it was sent to Anthony de Batista.
Mr. Barnett, was zoning one of the criterias that you were asked to consider when looking for properties?
Meaning what? I don't know what that.
Whether property was zoned for a single dwelling or multiple dwellings.
No, it had to be. Some of the properties had to be multiple dwellings. But there was always, if it was just regular like land, straight land. Then there would have to be, there wasn't any zoning consideration at the time, it was more of showing the property. And then it would have to be zoned for multiple homes on the property.
Mr. Barnett, were you present? Let me try it a different way. Ms. Strofa said, You can take that down for me. Thank you. Mr. Barnett, were you aware of something called the Rule of Law Foundation?
Yes, I was aware of it.
And as part of your security experience, were you asked to respond to protests undertaken by the Rule of Law Foundation supporters?
I didn't respond to, well, I responded to one protest, and that was in Grand Central Station. I responded to that.
And who contacted you?
I believe it was the MTA police. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but be honest with you. I can't remember how he got my phone number. But he had called me and asked me to come down to speak with the protesters.
And did you do that?
Yes, I did.
And what did you do as a result of being down there?
Basically, alls I did was I talked to, I believe it was, Princely at the time. Explained to him, about following the rules of whatever the police department required. And then after that, I left a business card with the 2 police officers that were in the train station. And then spoke to the deputy after. I believe it was on the phone, I don't recall it being in person. And he asked me, I said, if they don't follow the rules then they're subject to be either summoned or arrested. It's just the way it is.
Mr. Barnett, you testified about having been employed for Mr. Gua for more than a year, correct?
Yes.
And during that time, did you see him interact with fellow supporters?
Yes.
And what is your impression of his attitude towards the fellow supporters?
My impression of it is he loved them very much. He was always talking to them. They were like his primary concern.
Mr. Barnett, on the Mawa property, there is a part that is called the gazebo. Is that correct?
There is a gazebo on the property, correct.
And were there plans to do something with the area that is the gazebo?
There may have been. I don't know what those plans were.
Do you recall at all what the plans were for that area?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection. He just said he doesn't know.
The court said, sustained.
Do you recall if there was ever a plan to have a spaceship?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection.
The court said, sustained. Don't lead.
Do you recall of any other plans that you were aware of for the building at MAWA?
I'm sorry.
Were you aware of any other plans that were going to be put in place at MAWA?
Yes, I was aware of other plans.
What were they?
The only other plan that I'm aware of was the changing of a kitchen for the office space that was going to be created on the first floor.
How about the outside area of MAWA? Were you aware of any other plans?
No, not in regards to the gazebo. I wasn't aware of that plan. I don't know when that plan was initiated because I was out. I left MAWA in late August/early September.
Were there drones at MAWA?
No, there was an anti-drone system. There were no drones at MAWA.
Okay. What was the anti-drone system at MAWA?
Basically, the anti-drone system was a system that was installed on the roof of the house in MAWA. And its capabilities were that it can detect a drone, a launch of any drone, I want to say about 15 to 20 miles out. As soon as a drone is launched, it will tell you exactly what that drone is, what its capabilities were, where the person who was actually flying the drone was standing. And that's really its main capabilities. There was supposed to be a camera that would actually zoom into the location of that drone. But it was never installed.
Mr. Barnett, did you install this anti-drone equipment?
No, I did not.
Was it already there when you got there?
No, it was not.
Do you know who installed it?
It was contracted through Prevnitus. They hired a company that installed it. I don't recall the name of it. I'd have to see the paperwork for it.
Mr. Barnett, sitting here today, do you have any doubt about the fealty Mr. Gua felt for his fellow supporters?
Mr. Ferguson said, objection, Your Honor.
The court said, sustained.
Ms. Schrofa said, I have nothing further.
The court said, cross-examination.
Mr. Ferguson said, thank you, Your Honor.
Cross-examination. By Mr. Ferguson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Barnett.
Afternoon.
You were Miles Gua's head of security, right?
That's correct.
You were, in layman's terms, you were a bodyguard for Miles Gua?
Yes, that's correct.
You called him at times the principal, right?
Yes.
And at times you called him boss, right?
Correct.
Starting in October 2020, you were paid by Golden Spring, right?
That's correct.
You understood that was Miles Gua's money, correct?
No, I didn't understand that at that time, no, sir.
And you thought other people were paying for Miles Gua's bodyguard?
I wouldn't have had knowledge of that. It was basically hired by a company to do security services for an individual. So I wouldn't have access to whoever funded that.
And then after Golden Spring, Lamp Capital paid you, correct?
Yes, that was switched from Golden Spring to Lamp Capital. I don't remember the date though when that was done.
And Lamp Capital was another Gua family company, right?
That I had no knowledge of. We only received a couple of paychecks from Lamp Capital. And I never really asked about why the switch was done.
And fair to say you don't even know what Lamp Capital was, right?
I honestly have no idea what Lamp Capital was.
But you know you got money from it, correct?
That's correct.
And then after that, HCHK paid you, right?
Yes, I believe it was HCHK Technologies, and then later, HCHK Properties, something like that.
And HCHK, those companies were run by Guo and Yvette?
Yes. So my immediate boss was Yvette, that's who I reported to. At that time that's pretty much her and Anthony are who I reported to every day.
And HCHK had offices at Columbus Circle?
Correct.
Gua had an office in HCHK's floor?
Right.
And Yvette had an office on HCHK's floor?
Yes, she did.
They were on opposite sides of the floor, right?
No, I believe Yvette's office, I guess that was later on. So initially, yes. And then eventually Yvette had moved up to an upper floor.
And Gua and Yvette, they were together a lot, right?
Yes.
Ms. Strofa said, objection to what is a lot.
The court said, you can ask him to gauge.
They were together every week, right?
Yes, to my knowledge, when I was with them, yes.
Fair to say they worked closely together?
Yes.
And now after withdrawn. There came a point where you started your own company, correct?
That's correct.
Its name was, tell me if I have this right. Was it GS Security Solution?
That's correct. It's called GS Security Solutions.
And you started that company with the help of Gua and Yvette, right?
Well, I started that company with the permission of Yvette. Miles didn't really have any say in that. I never had a discussion with him in regards to that company. Was with Yvette, Max Krasner, and Anthony DeBattista is who I discussed that with.
And Yvette approved the plan for?
That's correct.
For that company. And Anthony DeBattista, you also discussed that plan with him, right?
I did.
Max Krasner, he had access to your company's books, right?
Yes, he did.
And he was kind of a finance guy for the Gua family companies, fair to say?
Yes, when I first met Max, he was the finance guy for Golden Spring.
Max called Miles Gua boss, right?
I believe so.
And Anthony called Miles Gua boss, right?
Yes, I believe so.
And Yvette called Miles Gua the principal, right?
Well, the only term she used with me was the P. She never used the full term, principal, just so you know.
You understood.
That's correct.
That meant principal, correct?
Yes.
And they weren't the only employees who called Miles Gua boss, right?
No, a lot of people called him boss.
And they weren't the only employees. Yvette wasn't the only employee. You and Yvette weren't the only employees who called him the principal. Right?
That I don't know. That wasn't a common term. It was a term that me and Yvette used with each other. I don't remember, I don't know if it was used with my other team members. But I know it was used between me and Yvette. I don't remember anybody else calling him the principal. But they may have, but I don't recall that.
But you and your team members also referred to him as principal or P, right?
Yeah. Most of the time it would have been boss. But I referred to him as P with Yvette all the time.
Now, after you started your company received money from HCHK, right?
Correct.
And HCHK sent your company money on multiple occasions, right?
For payroll until it was fully switched over. So there was an agreement in regards to how the company was going to be run and what services that I would be giving and getting in return.
And in December 2022, your company received $50,000 from HCHK Property Management?
That's correct.
And in January 2023, your company received $400,000 from HCHK, right?
That's correct.
In February 2023, your company received $200,000 from HCHK, right?
That's correct.
So sir, in the 3 months leading up to Miles Gua's arrest, your company received $650,000 from HCHK, correct?
Correct.
And that was after Miles Gua had declared bankruptcy, correct?
I didn't know Miles Gua had declared bankruptcy.
He never told you that?
No, he did not.
Sir, didn't you take him?
Ms. Strofa said, objection as to hearsay that the government is seeking to elicit.
Mr. Ferguson said, he's an opposing party, Your Honor.
The court said, overruled.
Didn't you take him to court proceedings in Connecticut in connection with bankruptcy?
I did. That's correct.
So what did you think he was going there for?
I didn't know it was in regards to anything that was current, meaning HCHK. I had no knowledge of that.
But you knew he had declared bankruptcy because you took him to court.
From a previous company, that's correct.
Ms. Strofa said, Your Honor, could Mr.
The court said, just allow him to answer.
Ms. Strofa said, thank you.
But you understood that it was Milesqua had declared bankruptcy, correct?
My understanding is the company declared bankruptcy. I don't know if it was Milesqua personally. But I did take him to court, that's correct.
Was it Milesqua who told you that the company declared bankruptcy?
No.
Did he ever tell you that he himself had declared bankruptcy in early 2022?
Not that I remember, not personally.
Now, Mr. Barnett, since Milesqua's arrest, you've continued working for the Gua family, right?
That's correct.
You still work for the Gua family, right?
Yes, I do.
Milesqua's daughter is your client?
That's correct.
Mei Gua is her name?
Yes, it is.
Mei Gua is your most important client, right?
That's correct.
And that's just before Milesqua's arrest, he was your most important client, right?
He was one of them, that's correct. The companies also. The whole entity was the most important company.
And, in fact, Mei Gua is your only major client, right?
That's constant client, that's correct.
And I think you testified on direct, but correct me if I'm wrong, that your other client engagements were very minimal?
That's correct.
Now, since Milesqua's arrest, you've received money sent by individuals who are not your actual clients, correct?
I guess so, yes. Meaning my invoices, how they are paid, is that what you're asking? Sir?
Well, individuals who are not your actual clients have sent your company money since Milesqua's arrest. Correct?
Ms. Schrofa said, objection to the form.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
I don't know if they are individuals. I just give an invoice to May, and then she has whatever. Pays the invoice.
And since Milesqua's arrest, you've received money sent by companies who are not your actual clients. Correct?
I'm unaware of who is actually sending the money, I just know it does arrive in my bank. I don't have an exact name of each person or how May sends the money.
The court said, but the question is whether those individuals or entities are actually your clients.
The witness said, no, they are not my clients. Mei Gua is my client.
And sir, on May 4, 2023, your company received $152,000 approximately from an individual named Jingrui Sun, right?
Yeah, I did receive that money. I couldn't tell you if that's who it was from. But I did receive that money.
And the next month, on June 12, 2023, your company received over $25,000 from a company called HGA Property Operation LLC. Right?
Yes.
And that same month, on the next day, on June 13, 2023, your company received an incoming wire of $105,000 from an individual named Xingshu Wang, correct?
I did receive that money. Again, I don't know who those were from. Those are all invoices for security services.
And, sir, you work for the NYPD, right?
Yes, sir.
And you know a money mule is someone who receives and transfers fraud proceeds, right?
Ms. Schrofa said, objection.
The court said, overruled. You may answer.
Yes. Provide services for that money. It's not, I don't just get money. I provide service for that, sir.
No, I'm talking about money mules.
Oh, in general. I thought you were calling me one. I'm sorry.
No. But you're aware that that's what a money mule is, right?
Yes.
And on July 6, 2023, your company received over $107,000 from an individual named Xiahong Zhang, correct?
I did receive that money, yes, sir.
And then on September 5, 2023, your company received over $49,000 from an individual named Dishingyin, correct?
Again, I received that money.
And then the next month, on October 30, 2023, your company received $10,000 from that same entity, HGA Property Operations. Correct?
That's correct. That was for an invoice for legal fees, correct.
And then after that, the next month, on November 10, 2023, Your company received over $55,000 from a wire that was from an individual named Yushin Lin, correct?
That's correct.
And that was transferred through the Overseas Chinese Banking Corporation Limited in Singapore, correct?
I assume so. You know better than I would.
And then the next month, on December 7, 2023, your company received another $55,000, approximately, from that same individual, correct?
Yes, I received that money for invoices, correct.
And then coming into this year, on January 16, your company received again from this same individual over $55,000, correct?
Correct.
And then the next day, on January 17, your company received $55,000 from a different individual, Wei Lai. Correct?
The court said, "Counsel, please step up."
Continued on next page. At sidebar.
The court said, "So I need to protect him from self-incrimination. Is his lawyer here?"
Mr. Ferguson said, "I'm not sure, Your Honor."
Ms. Schrofa said, "No, he's not, Your Honor. We told him that he was going to testify today, and his lawyer is away, as best as I can tell. But he's had somebody in who can step in. But I'm happy to take a break and call. But I think the government knows about all of this, and the government never asked him any of these questions when they proffered him several times."
The court said, "Have you asked these questions of him beforehand?"
Mr. Ferguson said, "No."
Ms. Schrofa said, "No, they didn't ask."
Mr. Ferguson said, "He's not our witness, Your Honor."
Court said, No. I just don't know whether or not you've had any contact with him. I think I need to take a little recess and talk to him."
Ms. Schrofa said, "Sure."
Continued on next page. In open court.
The court said, "Members of the jury, we're going to take a brief break. I will call you back in a few minutes."
Jury not present.
The court said, "Please be seated, sir. You have been asked a series of questions concerning an inflow of a considerable amount of money into your account. I am concerned that you may be answering these questions without the proper advice of an attorney."
The witness said, "Okay."
The court said, "And so I want you to know that you have the right to not answer these questions and you have the right to consult an attorney. Do you have somebody who is on call?"
The witness said, "I do have someone I can call."
The court said, "All righty. I'd like you to take a break and to make a call and to express to your attorney my concern about this line of questioning."
The witness said, "Okay."
The court said, "And then ask for his or her advice about whether you should continue to answer questions about the subject matter."
The witness said, "Okay."
The court said, "All righty."
The witness said, "Yup."
The court said, "Okay, so go ahead and we will wait for you to come back. He'll have to get his phone. In the meantime, we can call another witness. You may go downstairs. And just when you're finished, come back and—"
Ms. Schrofa said, "Your Honor, may we just confer with him about if he knows the phone number? He can certainly use one of our phones. That's the only thing I was going to offer."
The court said, "Or maybe the name of the attorney can be put into Google and you can find that phone number."
Ms. Schrofa said, "I do have his attorney's name. I'm happy to get in touch with the attorney and hand over the phone to Mr. Barnett. I'll just give him my phone so he can call his attorney after I give him the number."
The court said, "Okay. Mr. Ferguson?"
Mr. Ferguson said, "That's fine, Your Honor. We also have the cell phone number of his attorney."
Ms. Schrofa said, "That attorney is not around today, that particular attorney. We'll figure it out, Your Honor. But I'm just going to give him the number of the contact attorney and let him call him."
The court said, "Okay."
Ms. Schrofa said, "Okay."
The court said, "And in the meantime, I'd like you to call another witness. Is there somebody at the ready?"
Mr. Kamraju said, "We do have someone. I just want to swap out with Ms. Schroff."
The court said, "Okay."
Ms. Schrofa said, "Your Honor, Mr. Barnett is on the phone with his counsel. Would the court prefer to just give him 5 minutes, or should we start and interrupt again?"
The court said, "I want to get as much in as possible, so if we could have your next witness,